Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by hunky, hairy, huggable homos who love film to review movies and discuss a little bit of film news sometimes, although not always. Feels like I say that a lot lately. We need to get back to some movie news. But we have a double review coming up for you tonight, sort of-ish, retrospective, kind of, whatever you want to call it. We're going to be discussing two Richard Linklater films. The first is Dazed and Confused, which a lot of you have probably already seen. The second film will be his follow-up, a film to that, which is Everybody Wants Some, which we saw at South by Southwest and is now in wide release. But before we get to all of that, let me introduce you to my wonderful co-host. Jim Pugliafico is with us. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here, too. Welcome, Will.
Hey, cool kids. Glad to be back with you. Crappy sounding voice and all.
Oh, poor Will. His South by South sickness has mutated into some kind of crazy laryngitis monster.
I went from cold to bronchitis, and now I've got this, pseudo-laryngitis thing going on. So if I sound differently, I promise you I was not replaced by a pod person. I'm actually the same Will. I just sound a little different, so bear with me.
Well, we're going to try not to wear out your voice tonight. What's left of it, anyway.
No, trust me. It may not be bad tonight, but, it's going to be hard for me to shut myself up. So I only have myself to blame if I throw it out.
Is this a bad time to mention we're going to do, a death metal screaming contest on the show tonight?
Oh, Will, don't
do that, Will. Gee, Merry Christmas. You really do only have yourself to blame, silly boy.
See? Maybe that'll knock something loose. Maybe I'll sound better from here on. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Well, guys, let's start with Dazed and Confused. Let's just dive right in to our discussion of that film. So one of the things I was curious about, and we'll have you kick things off and tell us kind of the basic setup of the movie. Did you like it? Blah, 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 blah. But did you all see this movie when it first came out? Way back. Was it 97?
1993.
93. Right, 93. Did you guys see it when it came out?
No, I saw it shortly after. I saw it in the 90s, but I didn't see it in 93. I saw it, on VHS, while I was in high school.
And you, Jim?
Oh, man, I don't even remember the first time I saw this, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't, something I ran out to the theaters to see. I don't even remember what kind of a theatrical run this had. Most likely some kind of art house distribution at the time, I'm guessing. But, yeah, I don't remember. I remember that I saw the film. I just don't remember when and what the circumstances were, and I didn't remember until we rewatched it recently, last night actually, that a lot of what happened in this movie. I remember different snippets of it. I remember, of course, Matthew McConaughey, his performance in here and his character, but not really a lot about it. And as I watched it, more and more of it came back to me. Party at the Moon Tower, dude.
Well, I think my experience was close to yours. I saw this when I was in high school. I think I was a sophomore in high school in 97. That's why my brain goes back to 97 for this movie.
Makes sense, yeah.
And I remember at the time this movie was not one for me at all. Oh. So it was maybe interesting rewatching it last night. But before we get there, Will, why don't you go ahead and just kind of give us the basic setup here. What was Dazed and Confused all about?
Yeah, so Dazed and Confused, this is by director Richard Linklater, someone that we talk about quite a bit on this show. We like some of his works. So it is the last day of school in 1976, and these high school kids and these junior high students all kind of mesh in and out of each other's lives in a series of almost interconnected stories, not quite vignettes, as they all experience this turning point in their lives. what's so interesting about this movie to me is that it's not one of those films, and the one we're going to be talking about later on is kind of the same vein, where it's not based around one central plot point, like the girl gets captured, so now they have to go rescue the girl, or the killer is on the loose, so now they have to hide from the killer. This is more than anything a slice of life movie that showcases just what it's like for these kids at this particular time in their life. Interestingly enough, you have a lot of people really launch their careers out of this movie. You mentioned Matthew McConaughey. This was his first major role. Even people like Ben Affleck, who would later show up in like Good Will Hunting and things like that. Like, this was one of his early films. Mia Jovovich is in this, Rory Cochrane, Adam Goldberg, Anthony Rapp of Rent fame. Who am I missing? Joey Lauren Adams. You have just a lot.
Parker Posey.
Oh, Parker Posey, yeah. Like, you've got this great cast of people who went on to do amazing things, all showing up in this movie. I enjoyed this one quite a bit in high school, just because I enjoyed sort of I've always been kind of drawn to slice of life movies, even in school. I always kind of enjoy the stories that don't follow one central narrative and more about just the experience or the emotion or the whatever it happens to be. I found myself drawn even more and more to this movie as an adult. One, because I feel like I can appreciate the pacing more. I can appreciate just some of the nostalgia of it a little more. And from a completely different standpoint, and this is one that will probably be a little more unique, at least on this show. This film was created almost entirely in Austin, where I live, and so a lot of the landmarks, Party at the Moon Tower, I've been to the different Moon Towers and done like the Moon Tower tours. Like, that's something that I've done just to kind of track them down. The Emporium is
you'll have to give us some kind of background on that phenomenon a little bit later and explain that. Not right now, but let's get into that later. Yeah.
There's, in fact, over the weekend, kind of getting ready for this, there's a place in the movie called the Emporium, and they hang out briefly there. It's now a barbecue place, and so I went to the barbecue place yesterday. So I was sitting where they were filming parts of Dazed and Confused. The drive-in is right down the street, so just driving around town, I see Dazed and Confused as part of my everyday life here in Austin. So I will say that there's probably that weighs a little bit into my love for this movie. So, this is a movie I absolutely love. I absolutely adored this, and I loved it on the rewatch. Brad, what's been your experience?
Well, when I saw this film originally, I was still living like in farm country, USA, and I was a lot more straight-laced than I used to be. Wait, no, I used to be a lot more straight-laced than I am now, I guess. And so watching this film, of course, I'm watching it with a bunch of my friends, ironically, in the loft of a barn that we ran an extension cord up, and they had a TV and a VCR set up, and we're having a big party while we're watching this movie. And of course, I, being the socially awkward kid that I was,
you were the goody two-shoes one, right?
I was the goody two-shoes kid. I was feeling so uncomfortable, like, as drinking and pot smoking was going on around me in the loft of this barn watching this movie. I actually left 3/4 of the way into the movie because I was like, man, I got to get out of here. And I ended up finishing the film when I was in college, actually. A friend of mine had it, and they were like, oh my God, this movie's so great. And I'm like, oh, I never finished it. And they're like, here, borrow my cassette tape, my VHS, and finish it. And I did, and still I think it wasn't for me. The comedy didn't really work, and I don't know. I was just in a very different place back then, I guess. So when we were like, man, we are going to talk about Everybody Wants Some, we should totally talk about Dazed and Confused. I'm like, oh my gosh, do I really have to watch this movie again? But some 20 years later, and holy God, I feel old now saying that, I had a very different experience with it, actually. I don't know if it's just because I've grown up a lot and become a lot more open-minded and chill in my elder statesman days, but I was able to really appreciate this film for what it was, beyond just the blatant drug use and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. The comedy worked a little bit more for me this time around. I think it was the character relationships that I was really interested in, and it was ironically like the group of like nerdy people that are really sort of fixated on the most. Anthony Rapp from Rent, I liked his character a lot. I actually wish we could have seen a little bit more of him. But I do kind of like the ensembleness of this cast, and we had different groups. Kind of moving around. It's interesting though how they like move around instantly in this movie. Like, hey, they're at the Emporium, bamf. They're at the Moon Tower, bamf. They're at the drive-in. It's like, wow, how do you guys get from point A to point B so quickly? But I liked seeing the interplay, and I don't think I realized, and this makes sense because I was in college and finishing this movie back in 2000. I didn't know at the time that that was like Ben Affleck in the movie, or Mila Jovovich from Resident Evil at the time, right? Or Matthew. I mean, I knew Matthew McConaughey, but so it was really interesting to me watching it again last night. I'm like, is that? Oh my God, that's Ben Affleck. He's in this movie, really? Like, Batman is like running around paddling people with a woodshop made paddle. So I enjoyed it a lot more this time around. It's interesting though watching sort of the evolution, right, of Linklater's like Linklaterness. Like there's so many shots. I swear to God, like Everybody Wants Some directly like recreates these shots just with new characters, like walking and talking down the streets. And I mean we see some of that in the Before series as well. But this one I think is like a love letter. I think Everybody Wants Some is like a love letter to Dazed and Confused, which is a little meta. If you ask me, it's a little weird, but whatever. It works. It's fun, I think. So I'm actually glad that we went back and revisited this one. Jim, how about you?
Yeah, similar to you guys. I think the first time I watched it, it really didn't make an impression on me. Now, here's the thing. I'm probably the only guy in this crew here who actually went to high school back when this movie was set to be in high school.
You might have been the only one of us alive when this movie was set.
That said, most of that was not my high school experience. And by the way, we need to think about spoilers on the show. I don't think you can really spoil these movies very much. I think they're almost spoiler-proof because they're not plot-driven. There's nothing that really happened, right? I mean, nothing happens.
We're dealing with a retrospective for a movie that is 23 years old.
I won't spoil anything.
No. Here's my take. I think for this one it's fine. I think for Everybody Wants Some, because people may not have seen it yet, we'll do a spoiler section. But
agreed.
Spoilers for Dazed and Confused, which is like 25 freaking years old at this point. Go for it.
I think when I first saw this, like my nostalgia factor for high school, for me, my experience was just not very high. And so I watch this movie and I'm like, oh boy, I've seen this movie before. It's just not very good. But now when I went back and rewatched it, I'm like, wow, it really captured that slice of time. I mean, the soundtrack in this movie, I don't remember the soundtrack being as awesome as it was when I watched it last night.
Totally.
It's crazy good, and so is the soundtrack for the next movie, Everybody Wants Some. But I mean, the way this movie kind of showed you the different groups that were in our high schools, right? Everybody had the jock group, right? Everybody had the burnouts, right? We call them the burnouts, the kids who smoke joints after school every day, and the nerds, right? And I didn't really fit into any of those categories. I was more of a kind of do my own thing kind of person, but I did observe that phenomenon that happened in high school. I loved this movie a lot more. I appreciate this movie a lot more now, especially since becoming a fan of Linklater and his style and the way he tells stories. You could definitely see that like jumping off the screen in this movie in several scenes. And there were scenes that like were totally didn't make any impression at all the first time I saw it. And this time when I saw it, I'm like, oh wow, that so fits his style the way he does it. And then there were the scenes like you mentioned, Brad, that we saw in Everybody Wants Some that were echoed directly from Dazed. The opening shot is almost kind of beat for beat, right? I'll just say the kind of the opening shot of the movie, right after the credits or during the credits. But yeah, I really like this film. One of the things I thought, I know Brad, you don't think you've seen it. George Lucas's American Graffiti. Will, did you see that movie?
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh man, I recommend that you guys catch up with that one. That's an interesting movie from a lot of perspectives. First of all, it was a really big hit and put George Lucas on the map. Totally different kind of movie for what you might think George Lucas would do. This movie, to me, came across to me like Richard Linklater's love letter to American Graffiti, because American Graffiti was also a slice of life, slice of time movie set around kids going off to college in the 1950s. Same thing, out riding around in cars, meeting up with girls, all the same exact things, obviously done in a different style. And that movie launched the careers of several actors too, just like Dazed and Confused did. Harrison Ford, Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard was already a child star, but he was in this movie too. But yeah, I kept thinking back to American Graffiti when I saw this movie. Yeah, I really like this movie. It actually made me want to go back and see Everybody Wants Some again, and we'll get into why that is. Now that we're a few weeks removed from South by Southwest, it's amazing how little of Everybody Wants Some that I think I retained. So I had to kind of watch the trailer to kind of remind myself what was going on in that movie. But yeah, I really appreciate Dazed and Confused now, way more than I did before. And I mean, you have Matthew McConaughey in here. He went on after this to make a string of he was known for making kind of stupid comedy movies, I guess.
He did a lot of shitty rom-coms after this.
Yeah, like Two for the Money and We Are Marshall and
Fool's Gold, I think.
Fool's Gold. Yeah. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, that kind of stuff. That was his thing. But seeing him here and knowing the kind of actor that he's turned into, it's amazing to see to see those touchstones of when he was first starting his career to now. So yeah, I definitely appreciate this movie, and I mean, what else? More can I say?
Yeah, I don't know. What more can you say, Jim?
I'd say this. There.
Wow, nice. Nice, yeah. So it sounds like we all kind of like this film. Then, Will, you're kind of on the love boat, if you will, for this film, right?
Oh, yeah.
Was there anything like going back and, I mean, Will, have you seen it recently?
Yeah, I rewatched it. Saturday, like 2 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just going back through and watching this again, I'm interested from an Austin perspective. You recognize like a lot of the places, obviously the major landmarks, but what about some of the residential streets that they are walking up and down?
Not as much the residential streets, although to be fair, there's many residential parts of Austin that I haven't really explored very fully. So I kind of got the vibe like it wouldn't be very hard for me to find those. Especially because Austin's one of those cities that has grown. It's grown massively recently. So even as of 20 years ago, Austin was still not that big a city. Like it wasn't the massive-ish place that it is now. And a lot of the places that were in this movie are almost like shrine to him. There's this place called Top Notch Burgers. It's the drive-in that he is there. And when you go inside there, they have one of the paddles on the wall. And they do screenings of it on the, they did like the 20th anniversary there. So, this city has a love for this movie and for Linklater and for kind of what he's done for the town.
Well, so you gotta. I mean, when I was going from junior high to high school, I wasn't living in fear of high school kids chasing me around town with a paddle trying to beat my ass. Is that a thing in Texas, or what's going on there?
Maybe it is.
It was a big part of this movie.
I had a very atypical school experience because I wasn't a part of any one individual group. I mostly hung out with like the National Honor Society and like the theater kids. I did a lot of that, but I was friends with the jocks. I was friends with the goths. I was friends with the burnouts. So I never had that experience. Like I was a part of every single one of those groups in high school. I never had the I'm afraid of this group because I'm going to get paddled or I'm going to get bullied by this. And I know that that's not a typical experience for a lot of people, that that hazing and shit like that does happen. I just don't have those stories. I don't have those stories myself.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, in my high school, they just, they ignored you if you weren't part of the social circle. Like, didn't really go out of their way to beat your ass or anything. So, yeah.
But then you didn't have a Ben Affleck asshole in your school.
Yeah. No, Ben Affleck did not go to my school. I guess it is interesting here that aside from the Ben Affleck character, most of the other, I guess, the seniors who were hazing the junior high kids, like, yes, it was, it was abusive, it was cruel, whatever, but it was also sort of rite of passage-y. Like, once the paddling got done happening, it was kind of like, all right, you've earned your licks. Now come drink beer with us. Like, there was something that was cool. There's something like very, very hard to describe about that. How it very much is a rite of passage, at least to the way this movie puts it forth.
Totally. Like, Jeff Probst shows up, and there's a bunch of snuffed out torches and like melodramatic music in the background as they walk from. No, I'm just.
Wrong rite of passage.
That's definitely a different rite of passage. But yeah, well, like you, I was never really in any of these groups that are depicted in this movie. But I was always kind of on the fringe of them, and I was aware of them. The parties, like the big party that was held at the keg party. That's what we used to call them, keg parties that happened under the moon tower. I know they had those parties. High school kids in our school had those parties like once a week or once every other week or whatever. I never went to those parties. I just had other things to do, whether it was playing sports, watching sports, doing other stuff. And but yeah, I know for a lot of people that was their high school experience.
There was a party under the moon tower.
The moon tower.
Next time you guys are in town, we'll go. There's several moon towers in town, and of course now Austin's grown. They're in the middle of like commercial districts. Like it's not like a field somewhere. It's like, there's like a parking lot, and then like there's one of them sticking up there. But they're all over town. I'll show you one next time you guys are here.
Yeah.
We'll do a Dazed and Confused tour.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading about them, and I mean, at one time, I guess they served a purpose, to keep parks safe and stuff like that, or public areas safe.
Yeah.
And now they've become more of like historic landmarks almost, and they're being restored and restored, and people go to visit them and stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
And they're super bright, I heard.
They are. I mean, they call them the moon tower for a reason. It's like you look up and it's just like the moon up there. It's super bright.
Crazy. Well, guys, I think this is a good point to segue then into our discussion of Everybody Wants Some. Maybe we can kind of compare and contrast a little bit, like the look at the 70s versus the look at the 80s. How are we feeling about that?
Sounds great.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's paddle it out.
That's what you did there. So for those of you who are new to our format or just need a reminder, we're going to talk about the film spoiler-free. We'll give you some opinions on whether we think you should see it, and then we'll give you fair warning before we dive into spoiler Paddletown. I don't even know.
So everybody bend over and get ready.
Because everybody wants some.
That's right.
All right, here we go. Our discussion of Everybody Wants Some. All right, so, Jim, I know you saw this movie, at South by.
I did.
Like 3 weeks ago at this point, so I'm not sure quite how fresh it is in your mind, since you said you had to watch the trailer to remember seeing this movie.
No, I didn't say that. I said I had to watch the trailer to kind of bring it back fresher into my mind. I did remember seeing it. I just didn't remember a lot of details.
I'm just teasing you, but give us the setup of this movie, and if you think people should check it out now that it's available.
Sure. So first of all, the name of the movie is Everybody Wants Some, 2 exclamation points in the title. So don't forget those exclamation points, because not only does everybody want some, they're super excited that everybody wants some. So anyway, this movie's boy, and we will contrast and compare. This movie's about a group of college baseball players navigating their way through the freedoms and responsibilities of unsupervised adulthood. A freshman named Jake is the newest addition to the baseball team at a small Texas college, and he is quickly swept up in the rowdy, competitive atmosphere of the house where the entire squad lives, and he and the other players crash one party after the next in search of a good time and chicks to bang. And there you go. There's a setup of Everybody Wants Some. Yeah, so, I mean, we've heard this phrase before. This movie is dubbed by Richard Linklater himself, I think, as a, quote, spiritual sequel, unquote, to Dazed and Confused, which we just talked about. This one kind of shifts the focus from high school and junior high to in the 70s to college life in 1980s, and they are kind of separated by 4 years, where Dazed and Confused took place in the summer of 76. This takes place in the summer of 80. Actually, the fall of 80, because this is the start of school. It happens in the weekend just before classes start at the small college. This one has another ensemble cast, and if you know, a lot of these names we may not know now. I don't know if there's another Matthew McConaughey in this cast who's going to emerge as the next guy to star in Fool's Gold with Melissa McCarthy or whatever, but there could be. I think the cast in this movie is overall really, really good at what they do. Was it last year we got Boyhood, or the year before?
Year before.
2014 we got Boyhood. Probably one of the most ambitious film projects ever embarked on that Richard Linklater gave us. And from that point on, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see what this guy does next. And then he drops the trailer for Everybody Wants Some. And I kept hearing that it was kind of a spiritual cousin or a spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused, but I wasn't sure what that meant. And then I saw the trailer, and I was really confused. I don't know if I was confused or disappointed.
Were you dazed and confused?
I was. No, I don't know if I was dazed and confused, but maybe a little, knocked off balance by it. I'm like, the trailer, at least the one that I saw, made it look like kind of a cheap Animal House like knockoff movie. And I'm like, really? I don't get it. I don't get what Linklater's going for. And until I saw the movie, I was a little skeptical. But I did like this movie a lot. I don't know if I like it as much actually as Dazed and Confused. Maybe time will tell. One of the things I want to say though is, as I was getting to earlier, we had seen this after it was one of the last films we saw at South by Southwest. And I think it was on the last day, full day of films. And we had seen about 30 movies up to that point, and we're watching this movie. And I got to say, I think I was just numb because I just didn't retain a lot of this movie. It was a very light, this movie's very light. It doesn't have a lot of heavy themes or subject matter. And so it wasn't one that grabbed me in. I think it was good entertainment. Again, a killer soundtrack of 80s pop, Van Halen, Foreigner, The Knack, a lot of other cool stuff in there. So you could make a hell of a mixtape between these two movies. I I ended up liking this movie a lot. As I said, I really want to go back and rewatch it. I think this one will probably pay me off. Probably give me a better payoff after a second viewing than the first viewing, even though a lot of the cast was there and so forth. And we have pictures of that somewhere.
We do.
Yeah, so I guess I need to give this movie a rewatch, but I think this is a movie that I liked, and I think I'll maybe if I see it again, I would like it a little bit more.
All right, awesome. And Will, how about you?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one for me because you can't help but compare it to Dazed and Confused, which is unfair in a lot of ways because a film should always be judged on its own merits, but at the same time, even the filmmaker himself has drawn the comparisons. The overall format of this, the way they use the little title sequences telling you what date and time it is and how close it is to some special landmark. It's the exact same thing as from Dazed and Confused. Linklater is fantastic at moment in time. Like if you think about Boyhood was a movie that was nothing but moments in time. Dazed and Confused, moment in time. All of the before movies all do that. And same thing here with Everybody Wants Some. This is where he plants his flag, and this is what he does, and this is why I get why this film is part of his repertoire, why it's part of his archive, so to speak. I think it's a fine movie. I think it's a perfectly enjoyable movie. The comedy is quite good. The characters are... Some of the characters are extremely well developed, some less so, but they're all interesting and they're all well acted. I think the one thing that makes this fall a little short of Dazed and Confused for me, I feel like this one focuses too much on the main character. Like, this film really follows the one central character through this kind of crazy weekend and kind of the stuff that happens around him. Whereas Dazed and Confused, if I'm drawing the comparison, because I am, really didn't... You could maybe make the argument that like one or two people were the main characters, but they showed so many other characters doing their own thing. It was so much more slice of life. This one, I think, would have benefited if the focus was a little more diluted, if we had followed some of the other characters instead of just Jake. So I would say that that's probably a knock against this film. It probably is what makes it less strong compared to the other one. But if you're just looking for something light and enjoyable, I think this is a perfectly good movie to watch. If you're looking for something that reminds you of Dazed and Confused or reminds you just how much technique Linklater's got in him, just in terms of shooting conversational scenes, dialogue scenes, and making them compelling, even if it's just two people talking, this is a good one to watch. So yeah, I would recommend it. Just don't go in there... And I think this is very fair. I know a lot of people, kind of like you, Jim, went into this movie like saying, I just came off of Boyhood. I want something as momentous. I think that's a perfectly fair way of thinking. But I think you're going to hurt yourself if you go into this movie expecting like the next, picture of the year Oscar or what have you. Go into this with low expectations, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm kind of coming from, I guess, as a Richard Linklater newbie, right? I was introduced to Linklater really properly through the Before series, which Jim had discovered, and then I kind of watched with him. And I loved those, and of course I loved Boyhood. I thought it was really great. I don't think I was as in love with it as you guys, but it is a movie I really, really liked. And so when I'm like, oh man, like I'm way excited for this director now. Like I can't wait for his next movie. What is it going to be? Lay down some awesomeness. And then I see the trailer for this, and I'm like, really? Like, this is the next thing to come from this director I'm now excited about. A movie that looks just like a movie that I didn't like the first two times I tried to, watch it 20 years ago. But I tried to keep an open mind. I think part of it was, we were at South by. We knew we were going to be going to a showing where they were going to have a bunch of folks from the cast, where they were going to have, some of the producers and stuff behind the movie. Unfortunately, we didn't see it that first night that it was there, so we missed out on Linklater being there. But it was kind of awesome, right? Seeing it, being able to talk to some of the cast. It was Q&A after. So I think going into it, it kind of made my mindset a little more receptive. Like, maybe, I don't know, maybe I will really like it, and this could be fun. And I ended up walking away with this being one of my favorite movies from South by. And I think a lot of it is maybe I resonate more with the 80s than I do the 70s because I was born and I
You
grew
weren't
up in
alive.
the 80s. Right. I was born and I grew up in the 80s. So, Dazed and Confused had an awesome soundtrack. In fact, I just bought it like 3 minutes ago when we were talking about it. Thank you, iTunes. I also pre-ordered Everybody Wants Some soundtrack, which doesn't come out until the 8th for some weird reason. Anyway, so the music obviously is fantastic. Like, it's purely the music of my childhood. I have fond memories of like riding around in the car with my dad or like my friend's dad and my friends, just to clarify that. Just putting that out there. With this music playing, I obviously didn't go to college in the 80s, but there's just certain things like, at one point one of them's playing like Frogger or something, and it's on one of those like handheld machines that's so handheld you have to like set it on the floor to manipulate the joysticks with like the hooded screen, and it's such a love letter to the 80s. It's phenomenal. But I think I agree, as ensemble pieces, I think it works better. Following around Blake Jenner's character, Jake, he looks a lot like Justin Bieber, so it was a little hard to get that out of my head.
Tall Justin Bieber.
Tall Justin Bieber. But B, I don't know. I feel like it was fun. I enjoyed it, but there's not a lot of depth here, and that's where I get a little confused because like a lot of the praise from critics about this movie is like, oh, it's incredible depth and blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, I don't know that I necessarily see that. It's a fun ride. There's certainly a lot there to, I don't know, to enjoy. But it didn't like strike out to me like some kind of deep character drama. There are some interesting moments between some of the characters. We can talk a little bit about it in spoilers. But nothing really, I guess, coalesced for me on like a deep level. But as surface rides go, I mean, it did the trick. It was interesting being able to see Austin Emilio in the flesh, so to speak. I knew I had recognized him from somewhere. I didn't realize what it was until I was watching The Walking Dead last week. I realized he plays a character on there this season called Dwight. And Will, I know you don't watch Walking Dead, but I was like, oh my God, where do I know that guy from? And is it me or does he look a little bit like Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you were asking who's the next Matthew McConaughey to come out of it. I don't know that it will be this guy, but that's where my thought went right away. So it's like, well, Linklater obviously cast someone in the Matthew McConaughey as a younger man role. So anyway, I think it's fun. I recommend going out and seeing it in theaters while you can. If you miss it in theaters, I wouldn't be heartbroken, but definitely worth checking out at some point or another, I feel.
Yeah, and I just figured out that one of the guys, Wyatt Russell, is Kurt Russell's son.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
There's a lot of pretty faces. Hey, it's hard maybe for some people to connect with a movie like this because it is a bro movie. This is a bro movie. It's totally a guy's frat house movie. I won't say it's a pure comedy because it doesn't really go for the cheap laughs. Although there's a lot of laughs to be had when dudes are hanging around and constantly cutting each other, cutting up and giving each other the business and stuff. But Brad, you said it's not really deep, and it's not. It doesn't try to be. But there's something tangible about the way that it approaches the nostalgia and those golden times of when you're in college and how these guys are forming, as adults and that kind of first step of freedom that they have. Not deep, but definitely shines a light on a point in time in all of our lives, right? Assuming we've we've had similar experiences. I was, like I said, even in college, I was never the kind of bro type. I was doing my, I don't think once we saw, well, it was actually the weekend before school started, but none of these dudes looked like they were going to be studying too much. I'm just saying there was a lot of beer drinking, baseball playing, which I kind of like the baseball parts. That's another thing that connects a lot of Linklater movies together is baseball. Obviously, he's a fan, or he may have played baseball in a college or in high school, because we saw it in Dazed and Confused,
right?
And we saw it in oh, help me out. I know we saw it in we didn't have it in Boyhood, did we? Oh, well, Bad News Bears. We had a lot of a lot of baseball and Bad News Bears, and he was drawn to that movie. So, but yeah, it's a bro movie. One of the raps against this movie is that, yes, it does have females in it, but if you look at the IMDb page, like the first page is all dudes, and then it starts with the females, and the females in this movie kind of get a short shrift in this movie. They are there basically to serve as not targets. That's kind of a strong word, but
you're saying the right words. Like
kind of pray for the dudes who. I mean, they're out there to score, and they're looking to score. And now the movie, I give the movie a little bit of credit because some of these women, I mean, they're self-aware and they stand up for themselves in this movie, and that's pretty cool. They're not just there for the taking, and the movie makes you know the characters. A lot of the characters make you know that. So, but still, I couldn't tell you anything about any of the female characters in this movie. I could tell you a little bit about the guys.
Yeah, the women are there mostly for eye candy. I mean, there's a lot of it's called male gaze, like the when the camera like does the thing where it pans down and shows the ass, or like shows off just how sexy that body is as it pans past a woman. And there's a lot of that, and it's in some ways it's very objectifying. At the same time, like it makes sense because that's the mindset of these characters. So it's a valid camera technique. And the more and more I'm thinking about this. This is an interesting one to follow, Boyhood, because Boyhood ends on the guy's first day of college, right? And this movie begins with the college experience. So it almost feels like maybe wrapping up Boyhood, Linklater wanted to tell the next part of the story, but do so in a more fun, just kind of something probably more fun for him to write and shoot than kind of like this long, drawn-out process. So I totally get where this one comes in terms of the timeline. Like, I think thinking about it that way, I respect it even more.
This is not Mason's college story, though.
No. Mason would not have hung out with these kids.
Right. He'd have been he'd have been on the photography club or something.
Oh yeah. Well, guys, let's move into some spoilers. Spoilers are officially fair game. If you've not yet seen Everybody Wants Some and you value your virtual innocence, go ahead, step away, come back in 10 minutes. But where do we want to start with spoilers here?
Man,
I'm not sure on this one. This is in a lot of ways, and I don't use this as an insult at all. In a lot of ways, this is a plotless movie. And some people hear that and think that it's an insult, like, oh, it's written poorly. No, like Dazed and Confused was a plotless movie. It was based on a bunch of, interesting, fantastic scenes they kind of pull together, weave this like tapestry of what it's like. And this film too was just a lot of interesting sequences which showcase what this weekend was like for these people. So I don't know, Brad. I maybe I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I guess plotless maybe, but like there's certainly some character elements I think that you could potentially spoil. You mentioned Wyatt Russell, Jim. His character apparently has committed identity fraud to try and go through college 5 times and just smoke pot and enjoy being on the baseball team. Right? Yeah. He's ultimately kicked out for this. Right. We have the totally crazy super trooper in the making crazy glasses freak out guy. I mean, do you feel like these characters were people that you I don't know, Jim. You were probably more prevalently around in the '80s than we were. Did you encounter people like this back in the
I
'80s?
mean, no, that really wasn't. No, I can't say that. When I was watching it, though, I mean, like I said, this was a movie about a bunch of guys who lived in were on a baseball team in a college, and I really liked the locker rooms, not the locker room scenes, but like that camaraderie, that team camaraderie. It's almost as I was watching it, I'm like, I know Linklater remade the Bad News Bears, and it wasn't very well received as a remake of the Bad News Bears, which is one of my favorite all-time sports movies. If you've never seen the original Bad News Bears, it's awesome. But this was almost part of this movie. Parts of this movie was like the Bad News Bears in college almost. This team, they weren't a total bunch of fuck-ups, obviously, on the baseball field. They seemed like they had some skills. Who knows? We never actually got to see them play in a baseball game. We just saw a little bit of practice and stuff. And they were all characters, and I like that. It's how they showed each person's character quirks and how they explored that a little bit, mostly for comedy. But I like that. I didn't have the really. I mean, that guy was very creepy, and I wasn't sure exactly what was going on with his character most of the time.
Well, he kind of reminds you of the Matthew McConaughey character in terms of I'm the older guy who is probably hanging out with people way younger than I should, at least in terms of the movie. You know, that's something that we saw in Dazed and Confused with the Wooderson character, and here we've got what's his name, Willoughby, who kind of is in that same boat. Like, this is a guy who's constantly reliving his glory days, which were just a few years ago, and doing so in a very uncomfortable way. So, well, I don't know that that's necessarily someone that I knew in college or that I directly saw. I also think about this as, this is a slightly exaggerated comedy, and I do get the idea of a character who is kind of latched on, instead of moving forward, is kind of stuck in the past. Like, that's something we see all the time, from people our generation. There's a lot of man-children our age who aren't just in touch with their inner child, but are kind of stuck in kind of a perpetual state of not maturing. So I totally understand where this character is written from, and appreciate his role in this film.
One of the things I will say is I appreciated some of the ties between the two movies. Obviously, the car at the beginning in the parking lot, that scene was like, and I didn't even realize it till I watched Dazed and Confused again last night. I was like, oh shit, that's the exact same scene. Both movies featured Gilligan's Island in the movies. In the movie. Yep. This one was a little bit more subtle. One of the songs that was in the soundtrack was actually like a punk cover of the Gilligan's Island theme song at one point in the movie, whereas in Dazed and Confused there was I don't know if it was a drama club or what it was. They were talking about the characters in Gilligan's Island, and that was kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, soundtrack. Great soundtrack. And babe, did you say you bought this one or Dazed and Confused?
Well, I bought Dazed and Confused, but I had to pre-order this one because it doesn't come out till the 8th for some reason. Yeah. I mean, I could have made an Apple Music playlist or something of all the songs, but I was like, I love these soundtracks so much, and I'm sure Linklater and the musicians get 5 or 6 cents, per album that I buy. So I was like, I'll just give them the money instead.
It's weird because I probably have a lot of these songs already. Yeah. Buying these soundtracks is kind of strange.
I love that. Jim's like, I can't wait for you to get the soundtrack. And
oh wait, I have all these songs.
Well, it's funny. I was looking through them. I'm like, I have that song. I have that song too, and I have that one. I could make a playlist, or I could hit a button now, spend $9, and have it instantly on my phone in a playlist, ready to go forever forward.
Mhm.
That convenience is all. I'm all about that convenience. I don't begrudge you one bit, Brad.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I
Yep.
mean, this movie had the, a lot of his movies have these scenes between characters, maybe just two characters, sometimes a small group, and a lot of it is philosophizing. You know what I mean? That they'll sit around and they'll talk about concepts, not in a high-minded way, but just kind of in a very down-to-earth way, and bring them down to, the characters' mindsets that they're in, and I mean, it's the same way in the Before series. I mean, between the two characters there, they do a lot of talking and philosophizing, and they do it here. They do it in Dazed and Confused. I mean, if you watch a movie, Will or Brad, have you guys seen the what's the sleep one that he did?
Waking Life.
Oh,
Waking
A
Life.
Waking Life. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that one. I mean, that movie is totally built around the philosophy of dreams and so forth. But so that's a common thread in his movies, and a lot of the same camera shots that he uses. The walking. I call it walking and talking, but it's really walking and philosophizing back and forth. The overhead shot, right? He's a big fan of the overhead high angle shot. And it's nice to see it's nice to get to know a director who's very talented and see his signature on these movies. And
Right.
he's trying to say something. He's trying to say something in his voice, and that's part of what I go to the movies for.
No, absolutely. And you even saw a lot of his style copied and kind of Xeroxed across the 90s, like during the kind of the indie filmmaker explosion of like the early mid 90s. I mean, think about things like Kevin Smith and Clerks. You had a lot of that same focus on philosophy and just conversation, just two people talking about the minutia of their life and kind of these weird pop culture elements as they tie into them. And this even goes back for him back to Slacker, which is I think his first film. And I love that element of him because while it's oft imitated, he does it the best. He when the characters talk about their random bullshit, it's always interesting and it always feels grounded in something that I want to hear and feels like the characters would actually spout it. Whether it be in something more dramatic like the Before series, or whether it be something kind of lighthearted and by comparison shallow like everybody wants. So I think this is a guy that knows how to write dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Well, I think this is definitely a recommend. You could even say it's brutally a recommend from us. Anyway, go out, see it, wait for rental, see it, whatever you choose, see it. I think it's a lot of fun. Guys, why don't we wrap up with some plugs? I'll go first. Star Wars The Force Awakens is out on DVD and Blu-ray tomorrow, which is April 5th. So if you're listening to this on Thursday, I guess it's out 2 days ago. But Jim has pre-ordered it for us, so I assume it's coming tomorrow. Definitely can't wait to
Amazon
rewatch
says
that.
tomorrow before 8 p.m.
What? We
Some
actually
people already have it digitally, right? I think the digital.
Right. Yeah, it
is
came
rolling.
out on iTunes on the 1st, the 2nd. It was over the weekend.
Yeah.
But we know some people who haven't seen it yet, and I'm actually excited to watch it with them. We told them that we would. So looking forward to seeing that movie again, absolutely. Jim, what have you got?
Well, you guys know that I listen to other podcasts too once in a while. One of my
Are you cheating on us with other podcasts?
Yeah, kind of. Sorry, guys. I'm in an open podcast relationship, though. You didn't know that? We're already we're a triad, so we're already a triad. So I figured.
What's one more?
Yeah. I listen to movie podcasts, and one of the other types of podcasts that I really like are storytelling podcasts. And one of the best ones that I've come across is one called The Memory Palace, and it's hosted by this guy named Nate DeMeo. And the episodes are always really well done. Sometimes the subject matter, it's always kind of a historical storytelling, telling stories that have happened in the past in a very interesting way. And this latest episode really knocked my socks off. It's called, it's episode 85. It's called AKA Leo. And it's the story of one of the MGM lions. We know when we watch MGM movies, you see the lion roaring at the beginning. Well, the one that roars his name in movie world is Leo, but the real cat was named Jackie, and this is about Jackie the lion and his life and some of the things that he did, and that famous day when he made his roar that was recorded on film and on audio to see millions and millions and millions of times by movie people. This episode is only 10 minutes long, but really, really compelling, and it combines all the things that I love: movies, great storytelling, history, and animals. It's fantastic. So if you get a chance, you really want an introduction to a new podcast that I think is great, check it out, The Memory Palace, the latest episode number 85, named AKA Leo.
Awesome. And I heard this story. It totally destroyed my day yesterday in a good way. So I will echo your recommend. Good stuff. Will, what you got?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to announce this one. There's a film that was on our short list at South by Southwest that we didn't get a chance to watch. And it was called My Beautiful Broken Brain. It was one that we kept talking about wanting to watch, and then we just kept having to bump it for something else. Well, Netflix picked it up, and they released that sucker in record time because it is on my queue, and I watched it last night. So I wanted to recommend it, one, to let the two of you know, because it's like I just saw it last night and was like, oh, holy shit, that's the thing. So this is a documentary. It's about this female filmmaker who just all of a sudden she has this hemorrhagic stroke. You know, she's on death's door, but she survives. But because of the damage done to her brain, she has to kind of relearn language. She has to relearn a lot of basic things. Her brain chemistry and the way she sees the world is now changed. So she creates this film that chronicles her journey, and it does so from a very first-hand perspective. In a lot of ways, you kind of see or experience parts of what she sees and experiences. So it's a very experiential film. It's maybe not for everyone, but I thought it was absolutely exquisitely done, and I think it's worth watching. It's called My Beautiful Broken Brain, and it's on Netflix.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, great conversation, as usual. A lot of fun doing what we do, which is what we love. Will, thanks for hanging in there, even though you were not feeling great.
You made it!
Thanks for putting up with my voice as it went out.
Oh, we just made it.
Made it at the buzzer.
Just in time. All right, well, coming up next week, we got to figure out next week. Could be Hardcore Henry. Wait, could be... I think it's Hardcore Henry. Is that what we decided?
I think Hardcore Henry, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so go watch Hardcore Henry this weekend. Some folks have said, I never know what movie you're going to review when I go to the movies the weekend before your show. So guess what? Guess what? Now you do. Go see it, and you'll be ready for the Movie Bears podcast next week. Have a good one, everyone. Take care. Find all our past episodes on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, on our website, moviebearspodcast.com. Find us on Twitter at MB Podcast. Look us up on Facebook under Movie Bears Podcast. Take it easy. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.